My son stood up at the head of the table his father built, looked me in the eye in front of 18 people and said, "Mom, you can eat in the kitchen. This is our table now." I was holding a dish of cornbread I'd made from my mother's recipe. The room went so quiet I could hear the furnace tick. And here's the part one need you to hold on to because everything turns on it. In my desk drawer, not 40 feet from where my son was standing, there was a leather portfolio. Inside it was the deed to that house, a letter in my husband's handwriting sealed that I had never opened, and a brass key worn smooth from 40 years in Walter's pocket. My son thought he was taking the house from me that night. He had no idea what was already sitting in that drawer waiting, or whose name his father had written on the inside of that envelope. Welcome back to my channel, where the women they send to the kitchen turn out to be the ones holding the keys to the whole house. Stay with me to the end of this one. I promise you it pays off. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe, because there are things in this story I haven't told a living soul until right now. My name is Eleanor Hartwell. I'm 72 years old, and I have hosted 46 Thanksgivings in the same house on the lake outside Cedar Falls. My husband, Walter, built that house. Not bought, built. He and two men from the mill framed it the summer of 1978 with a borrowed cement mixer and a case of cold beer. He laid the floors himself, oak boards he sanded on his knees until his hands bled, and he carried me across the threshold before there was even a railing on the porch. We raised our boy in that house. We buried 20,000 ordinary mornings into those walls, pot roast on Sundays, the smell of wood smoke in October, the screen door that always slapped twice. Walter passed 4 years ago, in the back room, on a gray morning in February. And I kept the house exactly the way you keep a place that still has somebody's fingerprints on it. Now I'll be honest with you. I am not a woman people look twice at. I kept the books for the county for 34 years. County auditor, which is a fancy way of saying I was the person who found the mistake everyone else missed. I wear my reading glasses on a little chain. I drive a 12-year-old Mercury that my son is forever begging me to get rid of. I say thank you to the girl at the grocery checkout, and I mean it. People look at a woman like me and they fill in the rest. Sweet, simple, a little behind the times, past her usefulness. My own son started filling it in years ago, and I let him, because correcting a grown man who's decided he's smarter than his mother is a tiring job, and I had better things to do with my evenings. But here's something 34 years of auditing teaches you. The smallest line on the page is usually the one the whole thing rests on. People skip right over it. They stare at the big numbers up top, and they never notice the little entry at the bottom that's holding everything up. I had become, in my own family, that little line at the bottom of the page. They were all about to find out what it was holding up. Stay with me because that brass key in the drawer comes back, and when it does, it changes everything. Let me tell you about my son Bradley. And I want to be fair to him because the easy version of this story makes him a monster, and the truth is sadder than that. Bradley is 44. He was a sweet boy, the kind who cried when we put down our old dog, who left dandelions on my windowsill. Somewhere along the way, that boy got hungry for a different kind of life than the one his father and I could give him, and he married into it. He married Caroline, and Caroline came with the Ashfords. The Ashfords have money, the kind that's been sitting in the family so long they've forgotten it was ever counted. Caroline's mother, Diane, wears it like a thermostat she keeps the whole room set to. The first time I met Diane, she looked at my shoes for exactly 1 second too long, gave me a little smile and asked if I'd come far. I'd driven 20 minutes. Bradley felt all of that, and instead of letting it roll off him, he decided to win it. He'd out-Ashford the Ashfords. He'd have the right wife, the right car in the driveway, the right address. And the one thing that didn't fit the picture he was building, the one stubborn reminder of the plumbing and pot roast people he came from, was me. So he started smoothing me out of the frame, quietly, by inches. Mom, it's a gathering, not a get-together. Mom, let me handle the guest list this year. You've got enough to do. When I'd offer to bring my cornbread, he'd say the caterer had it covered, in a voice that meant please don't. I let it go. That's what mothers of climbing sons learn to do. You tell yourself he's just finding his footing up there. The day he feels secure, he'll reach back down for me. I told myself that for 10 years. What I never told him, what I hadn't told anybody, was that I had already decided to reach all the way up to him. I was about to hand him the single most valuable thing Walter and I ever had. I just hadn't done it yet. Thank God, as it turned out, I hadn't quite done it yet. You have to understand what that lake house is to understand what was about to happen. It's where everyone comes. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every baptism and graduation for 46 years. The long table seats 18. Walter built it to match the floors, out of the same oak, and he carved a little band of wheat into the edge of it the first winter we lived there. That table has fed this family through every season we've had. But here's what everyone had quietly forgotten. The house is mine. Just mine. Walter left it to me free and clear. No mortgage. No lien. My name alone on the deed. But because I'm the one in the kitchen before dawn with the turkey, and the one washing pans at midnight, the house had stopped feeling like mine to everyone but me. It had turned into the family house. A sort of public park that I happened to keep the grass cut on. And Bradley had started talking about it like weather, like something that just existed and would always be there for him. When the house is ours someday, he'd say to Caroline, not bothering to lower his voice, first thing we do is open up this whole back wall. He wasn't wrong to think it would come to him. He was my only child. Of course the house was going to be his. In fact, and this is the part that still catches in my throat, I was about 6 weeks from handing it to him outright. He just didn't know that. And he was about to do the one thing that would make me change my mind about everything. Here's what nobody at that table knew. That fall I'd made up my mind. The house was too big for one widow. The stairs to the dock were getting harder on my knees. And I wanted, while I was still alive and breathing, while I could still watch it happen, to give Bradley and Caroline the gift Walter and I had always dreamed of giving. The family home. Free and clear. A place to raise Maya, my granddaughter, the way we'd raised him. So I'd gone to see Harold Pruitt, who'd handled Walter's affairs for 30 years. We drew up what they call a transfer on death deed. Bradley and Caroline named to receive the house the day I passed. But I wanted more than that. I wanted to give it with warm hands, not cold ones. I'd quietly put a deposit on a little one-bedroom in town, no stairs, a coffee shop on the corner. I was going to hand Bradley the keys on Christmas morning and watch my son's face. I'd even bought the paper for it. A heavy leather portfolio, the good kind. Inside, a copy of the deed and a note in my own hand. Your father built this for a family. Fill it with one. And tucked in beside it, Walter's old brass key, on the worn leather fob he carried for 40 years. There was one more thing in that portfolio. A second envelope. Sealed. In Walter's handwriting, 3 words on the front. Only if you have to choose. He gave it to me the week before he died. Told me not to open it unless the day ever came that I had to decide something about this family that I couldn't decide alone. For 4 years I never opened it. I never had to. Remember that envelope. We're going to come back to it. And when we do, I promise you it's not what you think. I want to be honest about my heart, because I don't want you thinking I walked into that Thanksgiving looking for a fight. I walked in happy. I had a secret, and it was a good one. The week before, Bradley had been short with me on the phone, stressed about the Ashfords coming, about whether the wine was right, about the table settings. And every time, I just smiled to myself and thought about Christmas morning, about the leather portfolio, about handing my boy his father's key and watching 10 years of distance fall right off his face. I thought the gift would fix it. I really did. I thought when he understands what I'm giving him, he'll remember who I am. That was my mistake, and I'll own it in front of all of you. I thought you could buy back respect that a person had decided years ago you weren't worth. I've since learned you can't. Respect isn't something you can hand a person in a leather folder. They either carry it for you or they don't, and you find out which one on the day it costs them something. I found out on a Thursday in November, with my husband's turkey platter in my 2 hands. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, I have to tell you about the tablet, because 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, I found something I was never meant to see. It was an accident, the way the worst discoveries always are. Maya had left her tablet at my house. She comes by on Sundays, just her and me, and we do the crossword and she tells me about a boy she hasn't got the nerve to talk to. Bradley called and asked me to email him a permission slip off of it for some school trip. I'm not as helpless with those things as my family likes to believe. I opened it up to find the file. And sitting right there on the screen was a shared folder, synced from Bradley's account. I shouldn't have looked. I looked. It was labeled Lake House Spring Build. Inside were pictures, gutted kitchens, a wall of glass where Walter's bookshelves stand, marble I wouldn't know how to clean, and a contractor's quote, dated 3 weeks earlier, $58,000 phase 1. And I thought, well, he's excited. He's planning the renovation. He's just gotten ahead of himself. Then I scrolled down, and underneath the renovation photos was a second document, a draft real estate listing, lakefront property, Cedar Falls. Original structure to be updated or removed. To be removed. My son wasn't planning to live in his father's house. He was planning to sell it. I sat at my own kitchen table for a long time with that tablet in front of me, the way you sit when a doctor has just said a word you weren't ready for. He wasn't going to raise his daughter on those floors. He was going to flip them, turn 40 years of Walter's bleeding knees into a number that closed in escrow. And I understood, sitting there, that the gift I'd been planning wasn't a gift to him at all. It was just an inheritance he was impatient to cash. I didn't cry. I got very, very quiet. And somewhere under the quiet, a small voice asked me, Eleanor, are you sure you want to give it to him? I told the voice to hush. There was a turkey to brine. But the voice was right. And I want to ask you something before we go on. Tell me in the comments. If you'd opened that tablet and seen your own child planning to sell the house your husband built with his hands, would you have said something right then? Or would you have done what I did, and stayed quiet to keep the peace? I genuinely want to know. I read every single one. Thanksgiving morning was beautiful. I'll give it that much. I was up at 5 the way I always am, moving through the dark kitchen by feel. There's a particular peace to it. The house quiet, the oven warming, the smell of sage and butter. 46 years of the same morning, laid down one on top of the other like coats of paint. I could feel Walter in it. I always can on Thanksgiving. I talked to him a little, the way widows do. Big day, Walt. We're giving them the house. Can you believe it? I set his platter out on the counter to warm, the big oak one he carved by hand, with the same wheat along the rim as the table. I ran my thumb over it the way I have 10,000 times. I had no idea it was the last Thanksgiving I'd ever serve off of it in that house. By noon the food was a small miracle and the whole place smelled like every good memory I owned. I put on my blue blouse. I set the long table for 18 with the good china, Walter's platter dead center where it always goes. I stood back and looked at it. My husband's house. My husband's table. My husband's platter. All of it laid out to feed the people we'd made and loved. It was perfect. It was the last perfect hour I'd have in that house. Then the doorbell rang, and the Ashfords came in on a cloud of cold air and expensive perfume, and the afternoon began to turn. Diane came in first in camel cashmere, and did the thing she always does. A slow, smiling sweep of the room, pricing it. What a cozy little house, she said, which is what Diane says instead of small. So much character. You just don't see this kind of old construction anymore. My husband built it, I said. Did he? She said, in the voice you'd use for a clever child. How resourceful. Bradley came in behind her and kissed my cheek and had the decency to look a little ashamed, the way he always does with his mother and me in the same room. Caroline gave me a small, real smile and squeezed my hand. There was something nervous in it I didn't understand yet. And then Maya came barreling in, 16 and all elbows, and wrapped me in a hug that nearly knocked my glasses off. Hi, Grandma. Don't let them rearrange your stuff, she whispered. I laughed. I didn't know yet how right she was, because Bradley had already taken over. He'd hired 2 of the caterers people, just to make it special this year. When I went into my own kitchen to check my gravy, he steered me out by the elbow. Mom, relax. Let us handle it. Go sit. Go sit. In my own house. On the one day of the year that has always been mine to run. So I sat, useless, in the front room, while strangers plated my food in my kitchen and my son played host. And I want to tell you, It's a strange thing becoming a guest in your own home. It happens by inches, and every inch is too small to object to without seeming petty. Only Maya came and sat with me, showed me a video of a science thing she built for school. For 10 minutes I had my granddaughter, and I wasn't furniture. I was Grandma. You okay? She asked me quietly, in that way kids have of seeing the thing all the grown-ups are pretending not to. I'm just fine, baby, I said. I wasn't quite, but I still thought the worst of the day would be a little loneliness. Then Bradley called everyone to the table, and my son was about to do something I'd remember for the rest of my life. There were 18 chairs, and that year there were 19 of us. I counted while Bradley was seating people, directing them like a wedding planner. Diane up by him. Caroline here. The Ashford cousins down there. Maya up with the grown-ups this year. On and on until the long oak table Walter built was full of bodies, and there was, I realized, no chair left with my name on it. It was not an accident. I know my son. He'd counted. He'd known there'd be one too many, and he'd decided in advance who the one would be. Diane, ever helpful, laid the cover down first. Oh, is it tight? You know, she said, turning to me with that warm, terrible smile. Older folks are usually more comfortable away from all the bustle anyway. The kitchen's so much cozier. Less noise for the nerves. Less noise for the nerves. As if I were 90 and fragile, instead of 72 and standing in a house I owned outright. And before I could find a single word, my son stood up at the head of his father's table, lifted his wine, and made it official. Mom, he said. Bright. Caring. Made to be heard. You can eat in the kitchen. This is our table now. This is our table now. I want to describe the silence that came after because it told me everything. It was not a shocked silence. Nobody gasped. Nobody dropped a fork. 18 grown people heard a man tell his 72-year-old mother to go eat in the kitchen, in that mother's own home. And the silence that followed was the silence of people deciding not to get involved. Diane studied her napkin. The cousins found their plates fascinating. Caroline went white and stared at her lap. They weren't horrified. They were embarrassed. For me. A little. The way you're embarrassed for someone who's wandered into the wrong room. And that silence hurt worse than the words. The words were one man's cruelty. The silence was a verdict. 18 people quietly agreeing that yes, that's about where she belongs. And then one chair scraped back. Maya stood up so fast she nearly tipped her chair over. Grandma can have my seat, she said. Her voice cracked right in the middle of it, the way a 16-year-old's does when she's scared and doing the brave thing anyway. I'll go in the kitchen. Grandma here, take mine, I don't mind. She was already pulling her chair out. This girl, in the nice dress her mother made her wear. The only person at a table of 18 adults who looked at what was happening and knew in her bones it was wrong. For 1 second I loved her so much I couldn't breathe. And then my son killed it. Maya. Sharp. A father's command, the kind that doesn't get argued with. Sit down. Don't make this a thing. Don't make this a thing. As if his daughter's decency were the disruption. As if the problem in the room were the one person trying to fix it. Maya froze, half out of her chair, caught between her father and her grandmother and the whole crushing weight of being 16 and powerless. She looked at me, stricken, asking me with her eyes what to do, and I wasn't going to let them turn that child's kindness into a battle she'd lose. So I gave her the only gift I had in that moment. I smiled at her, a real one just for her, and I said soft, "It's all right, sweetheart. Sit down. You're a good girl. The best one here." She sat, slowly, miserable. What I didn't see, what I wouldn't find out for 2 more days, was that Maya had her phone in her lap the whole time. And she was recording. She wasn't doing it to shame anybody. She told me later she just couldn't believe what she was watching. And her hands moved before her head did. That little video is going to matter more than anyone in that room could have guessed. Remember it. But right then I didn't know about it. Right then I just set down my cornbread and I made a decision. I did not raise my voice. I need you to understand that because the temptation must have been enormous, and I honestly don't remember feeling it. What I felt was that 4 in the morning calm. Walter used to say I had it. A stillness that came over me whenever a thing was finally completely clear. The same stillness I felt the morning the doctor told me about Walter. When there's nothing left to decide, only to do. I looked at my son standing at the head of his father's table, in my house, and 10 years rearranged themselves into one simple fact. He did not respect me. He never really had. And no house, no gift on this earth was going to buy back something he decided long ago I wasn't worth. So I stopped trying to buy it. I set my plate down. Not slammed. Set, gently on the sideboard, the way you set down a thing you've decided you're finished carrying. You're right, Bradley, I said. The room went still in a different way now because something in my voice had changed, and even the people not listening could feel it. It is your table tonight. I picked up my pocketbook. I'll get out of the way. And I turned and I walked out of the dining room, through the front hall, past the wall of coats, and out the door of the house my husband built, into the cold, bright dark of a November evening. No coat, not one word more. 18 people and a steaming turkey and 46 years left behind me. I have never before or since felt so completely calm. And nobody, not my son, not his wife, not one cousin, came out into the cold to say, "Wait, this isn't right, come back." Only one face was turned toward the window as I backed out of the driveway. Maya, her hand flat against the glass. I lifted mine to her, and I drove away. If you've ever cooked a meal with your own two hands, set a beautiful table, given everything you had to a room full of people, and then watched them treat you like you were in the way, then you already know exactly the feeling in my chest as I pulled out onto the lake road. It wasn't grief. Not yet. It was something lighter and stranger. It was the feeling of setting down a suitcase you've carried so long you forgot it had any weight. For 10 years I'd been hauling around the work of being acceptable to my own son, and somewhere between the dining room and the driveway, I'd simply put it down on the floor and walked off without it. Stay with me now because this is where everything turns. I didn't drive home. I didn't have a home to drive to anymore the way I saw it. I drove to a little diner out on Route 9 that's been there since before Bradley was born. I sat in a back booth. A waitress named Donna, who's known me 30 years, took one look at my face, set down a cup of coffee, and didn't ask a single question. God bless that woman. And over that cup of coffee I took out my phone and I called my attorney Harold Pruitt at home on Thanksgiving. He answered on the second ring. "Eleanor, happy Thanksgiving. Everything all right?" "No," I said. "But it's going to be. I need to change some things, Harold. And I'd like to start tonight if you'll let me." Now here's where the story stops being about a hurt feeling and starts being about something I didn't even know yet. Because when I told Harold what I wanted, he went quiet for a moment. And then he said, "Eleanor, before you do anything, there's something about Bradley I think you'd better know." I told Harold I wanted to revoke the transfer and death deed, the one naming Bradley and Caroline. He told me what I half remembered, that those deeds are revocable anytime you're alive. It's your house. It stays your house until the day you die, and you decide where it goes. That's the whole point of them. Then I want to revoke it, I said. And I want to write a new one. I looked out the diner window at the lights coming on across the town where my whole life had happened, naming my granddaughter, Maya, in a trust she can't touch till she's 25, and her parents can't touch at all. "I can have it drafted tonight," Harold said, and then he paused again. "But Eleanor, there's a reason I'm glad you called." He told me that 2 months back Bradley had come into his office, said he was helping his mother get her affairs organized, brought a stack of forms for me to sign, and one of them, Harold said, he'd refused to file because it didn't sit right. It was a durable power of attorney, the kind that would let Bradley make decisions for me, move money, sell property, speak for me if anyone ever decided I couldn't speak for myself. And I remembered it. I remembered Bradley at my kitchen table back in September, sliding papers across to me, just routine mom medical stuff in case you're ever in the hospital and can't tell them your allergies. I'd signed 3 of them without my glasses on. He hadn't been planning to wait for me to give him the house at all. He'd been planning to take it, to get me declared a confused old woman, move me into a nice place, and sell the lake house out from under me while I was still living and breathing. The kitchen that night wasn't even the plan. The kitchen was just him getting impatient. "Harold," I said, and my voice was very steady, "revoke everything he touched. The deed, that power of attorney if it ever got filed anywhere. All of it. Tonight. Consider it done," he said. "And Eleanor, for what it's worth, You are the least confused person I know." I thanked him. I hung up, and I sat in that booth with my cold coffee, and I thought about the leather portfolio in my desk drawer, and about the sealed envelope inside it. Only if you have to choose. Well, Walter, I think the day's come, but I didn't open it yet. I couldn't sitting in a diner. It was at the house I just walked out of, full of people eating my food. I'd have to go back for it, and I had a feeling I knew more or less whose name was inside. I was wrong about that too, but we'll get there. I drove to the little condo in town, the one I'd put the deposit on, the downsizing surprise nobody knew about. I had a key already. I let myself in, and the rooms were empty and clean and quiet and entirely mine. I stood in the middle of the bare living room of the rest of my life, and I'll be honest with you about my heart, because I don't want you thinking it had turned to stone. It hadn't. I grieved at a card table that night, the only furniture in the place. Not for the house. I was keeping the house now. I grieved for the Christmas morning I'd been picturing for months. The one where Bradley opened that portfolio and remembered who I was. That Christmas was gone, and I had to let it out of my hands, and it hurt going. But here's what I want to say to you. And if you're somebody who spent your life giving and giving to a person who decided you don't count, I want you to really hear this. Generosity is a beautiful thing. But generosity to a person who has no respect for you isn't love. It's a tax. It's a bill you've quietly agreed to pay on someone else's bad behavior. And it never, ever buys the thing you're hoping it'll buy. You cannot purchase your way back into the heart of a person who's already decided where to file you. You can only stop paying. I just stopped paying. And while I was sitting there, the phone rang. 3 hours, almost to the minute, since I walked out the door. It was Bradley. I let it ring twice. There's a power in not being in a hurry. I learned that auditing for 34 years, the person who isn't rushing is the person who already knows how the numbers come out. I answered, "Mom." His voice was tight, frightened. The confident man from the head of the table was gone. "Mom, please. The lawyer just called. Harold Pruitt called the house. He said, Mom, he said you're revoking the deed. He said something about the power of attorney. Mom, is that true?" I could hear it behind him, the party still trying to go on, and under it Diane's voice climbing, asking what was happening. What did the lawyer want? "Hello, Bradley," I said. "Yes, it's true." "Mom, you can't just, that was a joke, the kitchen thing, you're being dramatic. Come to the house tomorrow morning," I said. 10 o'clock. Bring Caroline. I paused. "And bring Maya. I'd like Maya there especially." And I hung up, and I turned the ringer off, and I slept on the floor of my new life in a sleeping bag. Better than I'd slept in a year. He called 4 more times. I didn't answer. I'd said all there was to say that wouldn't just turn into a fight I'd be having alone in an empty room. In the morning, I drove back to the lake. I want to tell you how it felt to walk back through that front door because it's the whole point. The night before, I'd left as a woman they'd sent to the kitchen. I came back as the woman who owned the floor they were all standing on. Same house, same me. The only thing that had changed was that the little line at the bottom of the page had finally been read out loud. They were waiting in the front room. Bradley, gray like he hadn't slept. Caroline, red-eyed. Diane, of course Diane had stayed over, she wasn't about to miss this. Perched on my sofa with her coffee like she was at the theater. And Maya on the stairs, half in and half out, watching me with those eyes that looked so much like her grandfather's. I didn't sit. I stood in the center of my own living room, in front of the fireplace Walter built, and I waited until the room was quiet. And then I told them the truth. I went to my desk first. I took out the leather portfolio and I set it on the mantel where every one of them could see it. "I want to tell you all something," I said, "that I was going to keep as a surprise until Christmas. Plans change." I told them the house was mine, just mine, paid off free and clear, my name alone for 4 years. I told them I knew every one of them had stopped thinking of it that way, had started thinking of it as a family heirloom I was babysitting. But that legally, and every other way that matters, it had been my house since the morning Walter died. Bradley opened his mouth. I lifted one hand gently and kept going. "In that folder," I said, "is a deed, and a key, and a letter in my own handwriting. Because this fall I decided I was going to give this house, the whole thing free and clear, to you, Bradley, and to Caroline, as a gift, this Christmas. I'd put a deposit on a condo in town. I was going to move out and hand you your father's keys and watch your face." The room had gone completely silent. "That," I said, "is what I was doing while you were meeting with a contractor and a realtor." Caroline's head came up. "I saw the folder, Bradley. Lake House Spring Build. I saw the listing. Original structure to be removed." My voice did not shake. "You weren't going to live in your father's house. You were going to sell it, and you couldn't even wait for me to die first, so you brought me papers in September and told me they were medical forms." Diane set down her coffee. "Harold Pruitt has every one of those documents," I said. "Revoked. As of last night." The sound Bradley made I won't forget. It wasn't grief. It was the sound of a man watching a thing he'd already counted as his vanish right through his fingers. "You're punishing me," he breathed. "Over a chair." "No, son," I said. "I'm finally believing you. You've spent 10 years telling me, one way and another, that I'm not really part of the life you want. Last night you said it out loud in front of 18 people. I just finally took you at your word. And then I did the thing that broke it open. I looked past him, to the stairs, to the girl sitting on the third step. You told me last night that it's your table now," I said. "And you were right, Bradley. That's exactly the problem. Because of everyone at that table, 18 grown adults who watched you send your mother to the kitchen, only one person stood up." I held my hand out toward her. "Maya, the only one who offered me her seat. The only one who's ever asked me about the man who built this house." Maya's eyes were huge. "So the house goes to Maya," I said. "In a trust, held until she's 25, where her parents cannot touch it, sell it, or mortgage it." I looked back at my son. "Your father built this house for a family. I'm giving it to the one person in this family who acted like one." And that's when Diane Ashford stood up. She smoothed her slacks and she said, cool as well water, "Well, this all sounds like a family matter. Caroline dear, we really should go." And there it was, the whole shape of it finally showing itself. The very people my son had humiliated me to impress. The moment there was no lake house to renovate, no waterfront address to host their Easter in, could not get away from him fast enough. I watched Bradley understand it. The entire reason he'd sent me to the kitchen was to belong to those people. And those people were already reaching for their coats. Before they got out the door, Maya stood up on the stairs. "I have a video," she said quietly, to the whole room, "of last night, of what Dad said." She was shaking, but she didn't stop. "So if anybody's going to go home and tell people Grandma's just a bitter old lady, don't. Because I have it. And it's not true." Diane left without another word. That girl, 16 years old, the bravest person in 3 counties. When the room had thinned, Diane gone, the cousins suddenly remembering somewhere to be. It was just us, the family that was left when the audience went home. Bradley by the window, Caroline crying on the sofa, Maya on the stairs, and Caroline, who had barely said a word in 10 years, stood up. "I told him not to," she said. Her voice was wrecked. "Eleanor, I swear to you, I begged him not to do the forms. I begged him not to do the listing. I told him you built this family and he was throwing it away." She looked at her husband. "I'm done being quiet about it. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I was quiet about it for so long. It was the most either of those two had ever been honest with me. And I didn't punish her for it. But I want to be straight with you because I know some of you are already arguing about this in your heads. Be honest with me. In that moment, was my son a coward? Or just a weak man who got in over his head with people he wanted to impress and didn't know how to stop? Was Caroline a good woman who stayed quiet too long? Or just as guilty for never standing up until the money was gone? Tell me below. I read every one of these, and I promise you the comments on this one are going to be a debate. Here's how it shook out in the weeks after. Because I know you want the ledger, not just the feeling. The renovation never happened. The realtor's listing got pulled. The contractor kept the deposit. And then the rest came out, the part Bradley had been hiding behind all that climbing. He was in debt. Deep. The selling of the lake house wasn't a dream of a better life. It was a man trying to plug a hole before it swallowed him. The Ashfords' world is expensive to keep up, and he'd been keeping it up on credit and on the assumption that his mother's house would bail him out. When that assumption disappeared, so did the Ashfords. Diane found other things to do. The waterfront Easter never came. And Bradley learned the hard way the thing I could have told him for free: people who only have you for your house were never really going to have you at all. I won't pretend it didn't cost me. I lost the easy fiction of a close family. The next Thanksgiving was smaller and quieter and stranger. But it was honest. And honest, it turns out, is something I can actually live inside. The old arrangement never was. A month after all of it, Bradley came to see me. Alone. Sat at my kitchen table, the one I'd been sent to, which I found a little funny and didn't say so, and turned his hat over in his hands like his father used to. I should have stood up, he said finally. Not for you. To them. Years ago. I've been letting them set the table my whole marriage, Mom. Maya's braver than me. She's 16 and she's braver than me. It was the truest thing my son had ever said to me, and I didn't make him pay for saying it. You can start standing up anytime you decide to, Bradley, I told him. It is never too late to become the kind of man your daughter already is. He's been better since. Not transformed, people don't transform, but trying. He brings Maya by on Sundays now. And Caroline asked me a few weeks ago if I'd teach her to knit. Said she wanted to make something with her own hands for once instead of buying it. I'll be honest with you. I don't fully know what to do with that yet. It was too late to be forgiveness. A woman doesn't undo 10 years of silence with a pair of knitting needles. But it just might have been the beginning of something. I sat her down at my table and I cast on her first row. I'll let you decide if she's earned it. I haven't decided myself. Now, the envelope. I told you Walter left me a sealed letter. 3 words on the front. Only if you have to choose. And I told you I had a feeling I knew whose name was inside. The night everything fell apart after Harold, after the diner, I drove back to the dark house one last time before morning, let myself in with my own key, and took the leather portfolio out of the drawer. I sat at the long oak table he built, under the wheat he carved, and I finally broke the seal on my husband's last words to me. I'd assumed it would name Bradley, tell me to be soft on the boy, or maybe I half feared it would name Maya, and Walter had somehow seen all of this coming the way I sometimes think he saw everything. It wasn't either of those. This is what my husband wrote. 40 years married, and he knew me to the bone. Ellie, if you're reading this, then somebody's made you feel like the house isn't yours, or you aren't enough. I know how you are. You'll want to give it all away to keep the peace. You've done it your whole life. So here's the only thing I'll ask you, and then I'll hush. Don't give this house to the one who wants it most. Give it to the one who'd keep the porch light on for a stranger. You'll know which one. You always knew which one of us was which too, and you married me anyway. The house was never the gift, Ellie. You were. Stop handing yourself to people who set you down. Keep your name on the deed, and keep the light on, and I'll see you when I see you. Yours every day of it, Walt. He didn't name a child. He named a character. The one who'd keep the porch light on for a stranger. And I sat in that empty house in the dark at my husband's table, and I laughed and I cried at the same time, because I'd already done it. Before I ever opened the letter, I'd already picked the one who stood up. I'd already picked Maya. He knew I would. That old man knew me better dead than most people know each other alive. It's quiet here on the lake now, quieter than it used to be. I won't pretend I don't sometimes miss the loud, crowded, dishonest version of my family. The way you miss a warm room even after you find out the door was locked from the outside. But I sleep well. I have my husband's house, his table, his platter, his key on the hook by the door. I have a granddaughter who calls on Sundays, a son who's learning, an inch at a time, how to stand up, and a daughter-in-law casting on knitting rows at my kitchen table, trying to make something true with her hands. I gave Maya the brass key on her 17th birthday. Not the house. She won't have that till she's 25. And I intend to make her wait a good long while for the rest of it. But the key, Walter's key, on the worn leather fob he carried 40 years. The house, all of it someday, she said, holding it like it was made of something rarer than brass. I'll keep the porch light on, Grandma. I promise. She doesn't know yet that those were almost her grandfather's exact words. Someday I'll tell her. Someday, when somebody tries to make her feel small, she'll remember that the smallest, most ordinary act of decency, standing up, offering your chair, refusing to look away, turned out in her grandmother's life to be worth an entire house. That's the part one hopes she keeps. Not the house, the standing up. And every November now, on the first cold morning, I make the turkey on Walter's oak platter, set it in the middle of the table he built, and I sit at the head of it. Not because I'm fighting anybody for the seat, but because it was always mine and I'd simply forgotten for a little while to take it. It took my own son sending me to the kitchen to remind me where I actually belong. I suppose I owe him that much. The rest I'm keeping. So let me ask you one last thing, and I mean this one from my heart. What's the handmade gift you still have? The one money couldn't buy, the one with somebody's fingerprints still on it. A quilt, a letter, a key, a kitchen table? Tell me about it down below. I read every single one, and I'd love to know what you're keeping the porch light on for. If this story reminded you of a seat you've let someone take from you, take it back. You don't have to raise your voice to do it. You just have to remember whose name is on the deed. Keep your own keys. Keep your porch light on. And don't you ever let anybody send you to the kitchen in a house your love built. I'll see you in the next one.